and this is talking about reporting and report customization. We are obviously getting you folks ready for taxes and the year end. So this is a great time to understand a bit more about your QuickBooks and how that can help you. Next slide. And I'm thrilled to have Chuck Emery again, who's been our workshop presenter for this topic. And he's got a long history in obviously accounting and management and part of his controllership and other roles. Now he's semi-retired, but obviously doing this as a side job so he can have some fun and do his travels on the side. So, and Chuck has been a great friend of SCORE, and we greatly appreciate his time. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chuck so we can talk about the agenda and what we're going to do.
Hello, everybody. So as Karen said, this is the last in this year's series, at least. Previously, we've covered topics such as what are the benefits of QuickBooks. We did a little session on basic accounting, because I do feel people that are going to use this should have a little bit of knowledge so they understand something about what's going on in here. We did a workshop on invoicing, and now we're doing a workshop on reporting, because everything you do in QuickBooks at the end of the day culminates in what information are you going to be able to get out of it, right? And as I like to say, garbage in, garbage out. So, hopefully the reports that you generate make some sense. So we're going to talk about some of the common reports. QuickBooks has scores of reports out there. I mean, there's just a plethora of them, and we just can't go through them all today. And the fact of the matter is that there's very few of them that people would use day to day or month to month, or whatever it might be. Some businesses might use more than others, like contractors, home builders might use job costing reports and things like that. We'll talk about where those reports live in QuickBooks, the report locations. We'll actually review some of the reports in QuickBooks. Most of this is going to be demonstration in QuickBooks. Very, very few slides to go through. I think it makes it a little bit more interesting. So we'll review some of the reports, the basic reports that I think are the most usable for folks. And then we'll talk about how can you customize some of the things you can actually do with those reports, aside from just, looking at them. All right, so let's go move on. The basic reports that we're going to cover are the profit and loss, otherwise also known as your income statement. What money did you get in? What money did you spend? Where did you spend it? What was your net income? There's a number of variations of that. We'll kind of look at a couple of them that I use with my clients. We're going to look at the balance sheet, which is a statement of where your company, a statement of your financial position, rather. Basically tells you what your assets are, what your liabilities are, what your equity in the business is. We'll look at some of the accounts receivable reports, the money that people owe you. There's a few different ways to look at that that kind of make it a useful tool in collecting money that you might have to on outstanding invoices, older outstanding invoices. And we'll look at some accounts payable reports also. I find most small businesses don't use the accounts payable system. They basically just write checks, but we'll kind of talk about what that difference is. And when you see it, it might be something that might be of interest to you. And then there are list reports, as they're called, the lists of customers, of vendors, of employees, whatever it might be. All right. So let's see. Do we even have any other slides? No, we don't. So let's get out of here, and we will actually go into QuickBooks. Now, what I'm using here, I didn't realize I still had that up. What I'm using here, QuickBooks has a sample file in it. Now, once again, to make sure there's no confusion here, we are talking about QuickBooks Desktop, not QuickBooks Online. All right. If you're paying a monthly, and I kind of find a lot of people don't really understand the difference. If you're paying a monthly subscription, then you have QuickBooks Online. Totally does the same thing, but it looks completely different, sort of works different. At the end of the day, produces financial statements. You can do all the same stuff, you can do it, but it's a different product. We are talking about the desktop version. All right. First thing I'll point out to you where you can see service has expired. QuickBooks used to be where you could buy a standalone package, and they like you to buy a new one every year. But the fact of the matter is they supported that standalone package for 3 years. And then they started de-supporting it. So you couldn't do downloads from the banks, the credit cards. There's a number of things you couldn't do, but most of the stuff you can do. All right. As Karen said, I'm sort of retired, so I really don't use it that much anymore. I do work with a handful of clients that could use my services. So I didn't choose to keep updating it. All right. So I do my invoicing through it, and that's pretty much about it. Everybody has a different need for QuickBooks. So anyway, this is the sample file here, the sample Larry's landscaping. Karen, you can see my cursor as I move it, correct?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Now, this may or may not look like how yours is set up. One of the biggest differences might be it comes with the shortcut bar on the side, but don't let that fool you, because all we have to do is hit view and we can make it look like that, which is kind of what I prefer. But I think most people, because it comes canned out of the box with the thing on the side, so we'll kind of leave it on the side. All right. Okay, so the first report we'll talk about the profit and loss. If you have it on your shortcut right here, you can get to it there. Okay, somebody sending a message here. Okay. And by hitting it on the shortcut, the reports shortcut, you'll see the various little thumbnails of the various profit and loss statements that are there. Gotta move this out of the way. Okay. Or if you don't have a shortcut bar up, you can go right through the menus. QuickBooks gives you 2 to 3 different ways to get to pretty much anything. And if we go through the menus, we would just hit reports, all right? And we would just come right down there, and there's the company and financial, there's your customer reports, your sales reports, all right? So all the reports live right in here. So we're gonna go to company and financial, and we're gonna, if you see on the sub menu, shows us that there's a number of profit and loss reports. There's only 2 that I really wind up using, and I'll show you those. Profit and loss standard, all right. It defaults to this month to date. Usually when I'm looking at financials, I usually like to look at this year to date, at least this year to the last reconciled month, which hopefully is last month. And you can get to various time frames through here, or you can plug in whatever you want over here. All right, so we're going to go to this month to date. Now, if I say, I'm sorry, this fiscal year to date, if I say this fiscal year to date period, it's going to bring me right to today. But I usually in a financial review, will go to this fiscal year to last month, which in the case here, don't let the dates fool you either. This sample company is just, they've got the date set, the current date to December 15th of 2023. No rhyme or reason, that's just what they picked, all right? So that being the case, it gives us this financial year last month from January to November. Now, if there's any of you out there, and I see this very, very rarely, but I do see it, you might have a different fiscal year, all right? For whatever reason. So whatever your fiscal year is, let's just say it runs October 1 to September 30th, because I've got a couple of clients like that. Well, that's what this fiscal year to last month would bring you. October 1st of, say, 22 to September 30th of 23. Actually, that would be last fiscal year. This fiscal year would be October 1st, 23 through whatever. Okay, so we've got the basic report up. And you can see there's a lot of detail here. And what you have is when you see these little arrows, all right, they're telling you that these are main accounts with, if you see these indented, those are sub accounts. And total job materials is 19,000. If we don't want to see all of that, we can just hit that little triangle and there's your job materials. All right. It just rolls up all the sub accounts to the main account. So what we're going to do, if you see this little collapse button here, we're going to collapse the whole thing. It's just a little easier to read. If we wanted to see anything, like say automobile, what's an automobile? Well, automobile, they have fuel and maintenance. So you can actually expand any individual category that you want. So what we have our income, and he's got various types of income in here. And that's up to you and how you want to view your business. Some people just want to see sales. Some people want to see it broken down by different aspects of the business. That's totally a choice as to how you want to manage your financials. Right? There's no right or wrong in that one.
Chuck, there's a question.
Okay.
Are these the formats set up in QuickBooks as far as what P&L is shown and not shown, or does this have to be set up by the business?
Nope, this is canned. This is the way it comes right out of the box. Right? There's a few things you can do to it, and we'll get into that when we talk about customization. But this is the way. This is a standard profit and loss. All right. When I'm giving anything for a client to a bank, all right, I usually collapse it. Bank doesn't need to see all of that detail. All right. There's even a further summarized one in here, I'm pretty sure. I could show you that. It's either on that or the balance sheet. I'll have to look. But this is canned. This is the way it comes. So you have your income. You have your cost of goods sold, which is supplies, or needed material, not supplies, material needed to generate that income. This is Larry's Landscaping. This is a service-based business. Okay. Then you have your gross profit, and you could actually look and see what your gross profit margin is. And there's resources out there usually for your particular type of business where you can see what is a viable gross profit margin. And if your numbers are accurate, you can see how you fare in that. All right. So your gross profit margin would basically be the percentage of this 55,000 to the 60,000, which is a very, very high profit margin in this case. Okay. Then you have all your overhead expenses, your payroll. As you can see, Larry's not doing too good here. I mean, his payroll far exceeds his gross profit. So as you can guess, towards the end of this, he's going to have a fairly significant loss. I don't know how they came up with these numbers, but it's just a sample. And then, automobile, so forth and so on. All right. Comes down to your total expenses of 142,000. Then your net income, which is basically your revenue less all of your expenses, including your cost of goods, is a negative 86,000 in Larry's case. Okay. Then down here you have other income and expenses, and you might find some stuff in there. It's just like things that aren't germane to the day-to-day operations of the business, right? Miscellaneous income. Let's see what he called miscellaneous income. You can actually drill in on any of that stuff just by double clicking it. Let's see what did he say here? Woods garden, in-ground signs describing foliage. Not sure why he's got that in miscellaneous income, but whatever. That's the way he chose to categorize it. All right. You can drill in on any of these, and this is common to all the reports too. When you see a category, let's take a look at job. Let's take a look at job expenses. $1,818. I turn that into a little magnifying glass. Double click on it, and it gives me all of my job expenses broken down by the various sub accounts that he had. Okay. You can sort this by different ways. You can total it by different ways. Let me grab one that's just going to look a lot less confusing. Let me grab one that, let's see, rent. Did he pay rent to more than one person? No, he didn't. All right, maybe I'll go back to the one I was using. We'll go back to job expenses. Under job expenses, he's got job materials as a sub account. All right, so let's go into job materials. If you drill in on that, okay, you can then total it. A lot of times it's easier to look at it if you total it by something other than the default, the way it has it. You can total it by vendor, all right, and then you can see where you spent that money, okay?
Mm.
And as far as the profit and loss, we'll get into customization in a little bit, but I want to review the reports first. That's pretty much it for the profit and loss, unless anybody's got a question.
No, there's no question, but the only comment I will make, because I do this with my clients, this is where, by drilling down what Chuck just showed, is where you could find mistakes in your booking. Things get booked wrong during the course of the year. All of a sudden, something that should have been auto is somewhere in repairs, and something that should be in insurance should be in supplies. It's a good idea to look at these reports and look at the drill down and say, does it make sense to your business? Because then if it doesn't, your profitability and the way you look at your business will obviously be misconstrued.
Okay, Karen, that was a good segue into what I was going to talk about next. Another profit and loss that I use quite a bit when I'm reviewing my clients' financials is the profit and loss year to date. I'm sorry, profit and loss previous year comparison.
Good
It
one.
gives you the same thing. I'm going to collapse it again just to kind of get rid of some of that.
Yeah, and I just encourage anybody to ask questions that's out there. Obviously, we're here to obviously address any concerns you have with reporting. So,
right. This lines up that same exact thing that we were looking at. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's put it back to the last month. It defaults right to today's date, so you can just kind of drop that back to the last full month. Okay, there's already $6,000 loss. This is right here is exactly what we were looking at before, but now it actually lined it up with the same exact period last year. Now, unfortunately, in this sample company, they didn't give us 2 full years of data. This thing starts off sometime in the previous year. So we're not going to, some of these comparisons are really off. But what I do is when I'm looking at a company that's been around for this year and at least last year, all right, I can look, and if I see a big swing like this, landscaping services, there's either got to be a reason for it, and we can drill in on both of them, or the business owner that I'm working with knows what they in this case here, maybe they just started landscaping in 23. That would be a legitimate answer. Or, as Karen said, there's something that's in there that doesn't belong in there. All right. But this is a good way to get a good view of where you are and where you were, and to determine if you have any accounting errors in there. If you can't give a logical explanation as to why that increase or decrease happened, then you need to start looking for a bookkeeping error. All right, so that's the profit and loss previous year comparison. Let's see what else we have in a profit and loss that I may want to talk about. Let's see. Let's see if they have jobs in here. Yeah, they do. Now, if you are a contractor or a builder, there is a contractor's version of this, which gives an extensive array of contractor specific reports. This generic version really only gives you this one by job, but this is where you can actually see if you do your accounting where you tag your expenses, at least your direct cost expenses, your job supplies, things like that. If you tag them to a customer job, then you can actually create a report to show your income by each of these customers, all right, and what your job costs are. You really can't tag your overhead costs, rent and things like that, because that gets allocated over all of your customers. But your income and your job costs can certainly be done that way. And that's a big thing. I don't know if there's any builders out in the crowd that they look at for each house that they're building.
Chuck, a question to break these down by whether it's customers or otherwise. Is this part of the setup when you start with QuickBooks, or can you change it during the year?
You can change it during the year. Setting it up by customer, you just get into the customer field. You set up a new customer, and then like right here. And unfortunately, I can't demonstrate all of this because we just don't, we only have an hour. But as you can see here under this customer, if you get in there, you can set up different jobs under that customer. All right. Another way to break things down is by, matter of fact, I'll get into that. Was a good question, actually. Company finance. Another way to break things down is by class. Classes can be used for an extensive array of things. One of my customers is one of my clients rather, is a community club, and they have all sorts of social events. And they charge the members a certain amount. Guests can come in for a little bit more, but and they have a social budget. They're only supposed to be spending X amount of dollars from the club's dues for social events, and the rest of it should be sustained by the revenue coming in. So you could set up a class, it's called. All right. And in this case, he has it more like by the facets of his work. In the community club's thing, they actually set up Halloween party, New Year's Eve party, or whatever it might be. They track the income, they track the expenses, and then they can tell at the end of the party where they stand. And if they're losing more than what the club was chartered to lose, well, then they probably need to up their rates for the social events. But that's classes. Now I don't know if, and I'll take a real quick look at something.
And Chuck, while you're looking, we have a question. Do you need a bookkeeper or just a CPA or both or none?
Depends on you. All three. You don't need a CPA to do your books. All right. You're going to be paying an exorbitant rate. Even if they have bookkeepers on staff, you're going to be paying a lot of money to have them doing your books. There's a lot of bookkeepers out there. A lot of business owners do their own. And that's usually where I come into play to help them get it set up, figure out the right way to do it. And it is not very hard to do. All right. You got to pay your bills anyway. You got to pay your people. You may as well do it through here, because not only are you paying the bills, you're coding the stuff at the same time. And if you do it correctly, once you've paid your bills, you're doing about 80% of all the bookkeeping anyway. Right? So the answer to that question is yes. You can go any way you want to go, depending on you.
And I would just add to that, it goes back to how comfortable you are with numbers and financials. I mean, as business owners, you know your service or product well, And this might be something that you dread every day.
Right, it's true.
As Chuck said, and while you might be capable of doing QuickBooks, it might be something that because you defer so often, you could get yourself in trouble and that you're months down the road and got tons of stuff to do. Setting this, I cannot emphasize enough, setting up your QuickBooks the right way up front is important for not only you, but how you manage your business going forward.
Yes.
So having someone like the likes of whether a Chuck or someone else who knows this well, just to set it up, and then you can make that decision to do it. Or if you really hate doing it, then fine. Then you just need a bookkeeper because it will be, as Chuck said, much less expensive.
Right. And that's kind of why we got into the first couple of workshops that we're doing during the course of the year. One of them is Accounting 101, just very, very, very basic. And with that basic knowledge, you'd be surprised how much you could understand of what goes on here. And the other one is setting up a company file. If you get it set up right and you have a basic understanding, it really is not difficult. If you don't do those things correctly, you just have a bag of crap in here. It's simple as that. All right, getting back to that class thing we were talking about. Here's where, just in writing a check, all right, this is where you would put the account, the amount, a memo if you want to. You could tag it to a customer, all right, that therefore it would show up on that customer job report we were talking about. Or you could put it to a class. Let me see what kind of classes they have. He's only got classes for the different facets of his work, but there's all sorts of different ways that you can class this. One for here for Bluffton. I think there's some kind of a tax. I'm not 100% familiar with South Carolina taxes. I'm a New Jersey guy, if you haven't figured that out from my accent. But at any rate, there is a tax for service people that might work out in Hilton Head. And you could actually class those jobs that you make in the deposit screen. When you deposit the money, you could class it to Hilton Head. So you wind up with a report at the end of the year that tells you how much that was. There's a few different ways to do that. Or it might have been a tax paid to Bluffing, one or the other. I can't remember which one it is. But it's just an example of how you can class things to separate your transactions based on what it is that you're looking to do. Okay, that's it on profit and loss. Let's get into the other very basic or standard, I guess I should say, report, that the balance sheet. Okay, now the balance sheet is just out of habit. I always just go back to the end of last year, of last month. Balance sheet is a statement of your financial position. I'm gonna collapse this too. Shows you your assets, which is your current assets, which is your checking accounts, all your cash stuff, your accounts receivable, the money people owe you, other current assets, prepaid insurance, so forth and so on. Right? We don't need to get into all of these. Your fixed assets are those bigger items that have a useful life of more than a year. In this case, he's got a truck. Then you have your liabilities, all right? Your accounts payable, which is the money you owe vendors for bills, credit cards. You could have some payroll liabilities. Those are usually being taxes and so forth. And then you might have longer term liabilities, such as mortgages and loans and things like that. And then the difference is your equity, all right? And everything's got a balance. If you notice, we have assets of 142,000. We have liabilities and owner's equity right here of 142,000. Assets equals what you owe plus your equity, which is your stake in the business. Think of it as just like your home. All right. Your home is worth X amount of dollars. That's the asset. The liability is the mortgage. And the difference between the asset and the mortgage is your equity in the house. This works exactly the same way. It can get a hell of a lot more complicated, but generally speaking, it works the same way. Profit and loss and a balance sheet, those are the two standard reports that a bank will ask for if you're going for a loan. And they can look at it in a heartbeat, especially at this balance sheet, and tell whether you know what you're doing or not. And if it looks like they know what you're doing, that's a good sign. It means you're a good businessman. If you hand them, something that makes no sense whatsoever, it's not going to go so well. Now, again, I think I already collapsed this. The balance sheet actually has even a more summarized version that would be good for the bank. And that would be this guy right here. All right. Same thing, but they cut out any of the detail. It just gets into the cash accounts, doesn't detail the fixed assets, just says accounts payable, doesn't tell you how much each credit card is. But for a bank's review, this would be fine. Could always give them, when you're providing something to a bank or an auditor, less is better. As long as it makes sense, you don't need to give them a whole slew of detail because that just opens you up for further questioning.
And I can't agree with you enough, Chuck. The less, and let them ask for more, because at the end of the day, you may be just getting yourself into a whole rabbit hole that you really don't need for what the purposes are.
Exactly. Okay, so that was the balance sheet. Now we got some accounts receivable reports. What time is it? Okay, we're good. We got some under customers and financials. This is a standard one right here, accounts receivable aging. It just shows who your customers are, whether their outstanding bills or invoices, I should say, are current, whether they're 1 to 30 days old, 31 to 60, so forth and so on. All right, you can tell it that you want to see the bills through X amount, and then it just kind of, if you tell it 90 days, it gives you the 30. It gives you in 1 month increments up to 90 days, and after that, just says everything over 90 days. I stumbled on that one a little bit. All right, this is an excellent report to see exactly who owes you what and how old it is. We can go look at if
Chuck, there's another question. How
Sure.
often should I be looking at these reports?
At least once a month. I mean, if you're truly kind of running the business from a financial perspective, that means you're reconciling your bank and your credit card accounts at least on a monthly basis. All right, you can usually get that done within the first week or so of the month, at the end of the month, and then you look at these things. It's a whole lot easier to do that than trying to grab the thing every 6 months or so, and then when you don't see something, then you're pouring through 6 months worth of crap to see where it is. Plus, you never know. You might get a workers' comp audit. You could get a general liability audit. You may want to go for a loan at a bank or whatever it might be. And if you're doing this, making this a monthly routine, well, your financials are up to date right then and there. You just hit a button and you have the reports that you need without a whole bunch of scrambling. And a lot of people out there are probably saying, no way I'm going to do that. But that's the way it should work, at least from a financial perspective.
It should. And again, I understand. I know some of my clients just don't have time, or, again, this is one of their least favorite things to do. At a minimum, do it quarterly, please. Because if you wait that much longer and you have a problem and your reports don't, it's a real pain to undo some issues, whether it's booking issues or certain way of you're doing business. So, or know that you're in trouble, to say, going back to the P&L we just saw, and you're losing money and like, oh my God, how am I going to get to the end of the year?
Exactly. Running a business is more than, do I have money in the bank? You can have money in the bank and still losing money. So you really should be looking at that. Let's see. All right. So we were in customers. Okay. We could look at a customer balance summary, which basically, and I'll collapse this again, and keep your eye on Mike Ballack and 330 Main Street. Just keep your eye on that. When I collapse it, it all goes to Mike Ballack. That's all the collapse is doing. It's rolling up the guys that had this little arrow. All right. And there's a very succinct report here just to say, hey, this is who owes me money. Doesn't give you, how old is it or that, but it just gives you a quick look. And, depending on how many clients you have, a lot of customers kind of know off the top of their head or think they know off the top of their head who owes them money. And if you look at this and say, well, wait a second, so-and-so doesn't really owe me that. And then that's another way where you find bookkeeping errors. There is a collections report. Oh, let me go back to that customer balance summary. All right, let me collapse it again. One thing I forgot to mention. You want to see the detail on any of these. Let's say Edward Blackwell. All right, we can drill in on him, and it gives you a complete history of all of the bills, the payments, the whole 9 yards that comes down to that $1,125. The transactions are right here, the transaction amounts, and a running balance right here. Okay. And you can see as of right here, November 11th, he had a running balance of 0. So it means he was clean up to that point. And then I had an $1,125 invoice, a $480 payment, and then another $480 payment. No, I'm sorry, another $480 invoice. So it looks like this guy owes this 480 invoice plus an open balance on here. But the way you can really tell that, another useful report on the customers is open invoices. This now just gives you a list of those invoices that are still open. All right. It goes down. Let's see what else we have on the customers. And I think that's, well, there's a collections report right here. This comes in handy too. All of his stuff was within 30 days, but you can say here how much, if you want to look at anything X amount of days past due, based on whatever terms you have, you hit this here and those will come out. This is meant to start making your collections calls on. All right, reports. Let's go to vendors. And vendors and payables really is just the opposite of customers and receivables. And you have the same types of things. Your accounts payable aging. Now, accounts payable, when I say accounts payable versus just writing checks, all right? I think we have time for this. I want people to understand this. Writing a check, you basically just do this. You write the check, you print it out, you send it out, okay? It charges the expense, whatever it is you told it to do down here, and it takes the money out of your check register. Simple. All right? And a lot of businesses, smaller businesses do that. But then there are businesses that are a little bit bigger, have a little bit more volume. They have tons of bills coming in, and they really need to kind of keep track of them. And when they pay a vendor, it may be for 5, 10, 15, 20 bills. Let's take a home builder again, right? So to write that check, the way I just said here, you'd have to kind of add all that stuff together, summarize it, all this kind of stuff. Whereas if you go into vendors and say enter bills, what you're doing here, it almost looks like a check, all right? And it fills out kind of like a check. You're putting the vendor in, you're putting whatever the date of the bill is, the bill number, the amount. You're going to charge it off to something over here, okay? You can charge it to a job if you want. You can put it to a class if you want, and then you save it, all right? And then you enter each and every bill. You're not paying anything at this point. You're just entering the bills, and QuickBooks is then going to keep track for you. It's going to enter those expenses. It's going to set it up as a liability, call the accounts payable saying, hey, you entered this bill. I charged the expense. I set up a liability for you. And it's going to kind of keep track of all of that. And then when it comes time, maybe you pay your bills twice a month. Maybe you pay them every week. It's whatever you're doing. You go back into
We got 2 questions here.
Oh, sure.
Does this report populate if I am not using QuickBooks for invoicing? I am using Square and it is connected to my QuickBooks Online, so all the information is in there.
I would have to see how it's set up. I worked with a couple of clients that were feeding Square into QuickBooks, and it became more of a mess than anything else. We're talking about bills that you're paying, though. All right, Square is bringing in your receipts. All right, that's kind of the opposite. We're talking about the bills that you're paying, and I don't think that is done through Square at all. I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
So this person's looking for receivables. So their invoice,
Exactly.
obviously
Yes,
not paying a vendor, they're invoicing it.
right. Okay. Yes, Square would send invoices in, it would send the payments in. I have seen that. Unless you really know what you're doing, that can really get screwed up. I've seen duplicate payments come in. Matter of fact, I just kind of finished with a client who was using Square, and it just wasn't working as well as they thought it might. We wound up disconnecting it. But to simply answer your question, yes, Square um, will send the invoices across. It will send the payments across.
Mm.
And if it's working well for you, well, fine. And what
This person clarified is they're asking about the customer balance summary report. And will
what
that be populated from obviously a Square invoicing system versus a QuickBooks?
yeah, because it's because QuickBooks, the Square QuickBooks interface is posting those invoices to those customers. And if there is no payment, yes, they would pop up on the receivables reports.
Okay. They said thank you. We got a couple more questions. Can
Okay.
I create a super bill for a client that has already paid so they can submit it to their insurance company?
A super bill?
Yeah, I don't know what they mean by super bill.
Read the question again.
Can I create a super bill for a client that has already paid so they can submit to their insurance company?
Well, I don't know what a super bill is, but yes, if you've invoiced it through QuickBooks, um, you can, there's a there's a facility in QuickBooks to mark the invoices as paid. So assuming that they're invoicing and receiving the payment in QuickBooks, yes, you can. If
Oh, what they're asking is, are all invoices together? So obviously they're invoicing clients for multiple things, but they want to get one, as they're calling super bill, one summary bill of
uh,
all invoices so they can submit it to an insurance company.
you can, okay, now I understand what they're looking for. If you come into customers over here, you can create statements. That's that's really what she's calling us, or he or she is calling a super bill, is really a statement. You put the statement date down, you say from this period to that period. You can say for one customer, you say who the customer is. Let's see who we have here. I don't know, Adam's Candy Shop. Let's see what happens. Preview. There's your invoice, there's your payment, and if there was any others in here, it's a statement. So yes, you can. I hope that answers the question.
Um, we have another question. Isn't entering bills meant for vendors that have given you payment terms?
No, you can enter bills for anybody, but typically vendors do give you payment terms. Um, and one of them could be due on receipt. But if you're running an accounts payable, you would enter them all regardless of the payment terms. And
Yeah.
again, this isn't for everybody. If you just have a bill here and a bill there, and sporadic because you're kind of small, well, you have a small business, well, then you can write checks. This is for if you have more volume.
Yeah, and then I agree with you. I mean, this is an issue in which there are some people out there, and obviously who obviously may be on this call, is you just pay the vendor. The bill comes in and you just pay them. So you're not entering it to have a receivable or a payable. It's just cash in and cash out. This allows you to monitor them on an ongoing basis if you have many that you just want to keep track of.
Right. Any other
That's
questions?
that's the end of the questions for now.
Okay. All right. Oh, we were talking about vendors. So you have the vendor aging, the vendor aging summary, which is just like the receivables one we were talking about, the vendor balance detail, which is just like the customer balance detail we were talking about. I'm going to kind of speed up here a little bit because I want to get into customization. We only got about 10 minutes left. You can see your unpaid bills, just like you could see your open invoices. It's really all the same type of reports, only on the opposite end. All right. And the other thing we were going to talk about is lists. And you could get in a list of your chart of accounts. You can get a customer list, a vendor list, the employees. That's all these really are is various lists that you can do. All right. All right. I'm just going to use this profit and loss just as a test ground here so we can see some of the customization that you can do. And I'm going to bring it back to, let's see, I'll bring it back to 01/01/21 to today, today in Larry's world. Let's say, okay, so you can do a lot of dates here. All right. You can plug the dates in just the way I did. I could say I want basically what, 2.5 years worth of stuff. And if I change it from total only to year, and I collapse this just as you can see, there was nothing in there for 21, but I can see each of the years if I want to see a trend of where I'm going. So my clients that have been in business for a while, they like to see this, how did they do this year versus last year versus the year before? Are they on an increase? Are they on a decrease? Well, what do they got going for them? And a lot of times they get very surprised when they see this. It's not what they actually thought it was going to be. All right. Some of the other things you can do, let's tell you what.
We have another question
Okay.
for Chuck. This person is saying, well, the format for the statements isn't helpful to them. The default format doesn't work because it's hard to decipher for their purposes. But also statements show they write in a memo line, and the clients can't see our memo line until they get a statement. But those notes are for our eyes only. Can we make statements without showing the memo information? Also, is there more than one template to use for statements?
Yeah, that's getting back into what we were doing for invoicing. I can't get too deep into that, but yeah, if you look under lists, templates, let's see. There's the Intuit standard statement, and then you can kind of customize it from here. I can't get into all of that right now, though. But yeah, you can use this layout designer. You got to make a copy of it. You can't do the standard one. You can use this layout designer. And the one thing, as far as this person was saying, as far as the memo, you can create a custom field that's in here. All right. And again, I don't have time to get through that whole thing. But yes, you can create some custom fields that you can input stuff in. And I believe you can exclude them from the statements. But that I would have to kind of get deeper into, to be honest with you.
And what I would recommend for that person, we did invoicing in our last workshop. You may want to request that recording because it might help you obviously figure out what you need. And then if that still doesn't help you, obviously a phone call to Chuck always is available. We have one more question and then we got to keep moving on. I have figured out how to add inventory parts to the list with a copy and paste from Excel. Is there any way to automate booking the sales of inventory parts? Would love to be able to copy and paste from Excel rather than have to manually type in each individual item into a sales receipt.
There is a way to import things into QuickBooks. It's another one I would kind of have to look into. Yes, there is a way, but you'd have to know how to set up the Excel spreadsheet. to interface exactly in there. And then not knowing this person's business, I hope they do have a true need for inventory, because I've seen some clients that thought they did, and all they were doing was really complicating their bookkeeping by setting things up as inventory, because QuickBooks does some funky accounting in the background when it comes to inventory parts. Gets into
Recommend to this person with the question is that and when we get through the end of the presentation, you'll have Chuck's obviously contact information
yeah,
to reach out to him directly so he could understand better to give you an appropriate
yeah,
answer.
exactly. Some of these things we need to have an offline conversation about. Okay, as far as customization, all right, that's some of the general stuff. I'm gonna have to really move now. You can send these reports into Excel by creating a new worksheet, assuming that you have Excel on your desktop or laptop. And this is useful for sending reports to your accountant. Although you can send them in a total QuickBooks company file, a portable file rather. If you hit customize report here, there are some of the stuff that's in here we already looked at. You could tell it that you want to see each of these rows as a percent of income. So if you want to look at, remember we were talking about his gross profit, he's got a 92% gross profit. That's huge, which is weird seeing he's losing money. So they don't take any stock in a lot of these numbers. You can filter so that report only shows certain items, and you'd have to kind of look through these filters. You can change the header and footer if you wanted to. You can change the fonts. And that is, I think that's about it, Karen.
Yeah, I think so too. So we can go back to the slide presentation. And again, I know we went through a lot of this stuff quickly that Chuck just went, but a lot of this has to do with what makes sense for your business at the end. So honestly, someone's asking for a copy. Everyone's going to get a copy of this presentation as well as the recording, just so everybody knows.
Right. I guess I got the key takeaways here.
Here you go. Mm-hmm.
Okay, reports, they're the end game for inputting data, garbage in, garbage out. Most standard reports can be customized to fit your needs. You could be surprised if you spend a little time with these things, how much you can really customize them. Reports can be saved to Excel. They can be saved to a PDF, and this is for sending them externally, either to a bank or to your accountant. They can be customized. We didn't get into it, unfortunately, but they can be memorized. At the top of the report, there's a memorize button. So if you like a really customized one and you don't really want to have to do that each and every time, you can then memorize it and save it in a little folder called memorized reports. And they can be emailed. And let's see, takeaways. All right, as far as resources, we have, let me get this back into a screen, slideshow. Whoops. You can go out there. There's a book called Accounting for Dummies, QuickBooks for Dummies. No disparagement on anybody out there, but these are some pretty good books that lays things out in plain English. You can do a Google search, learn QuickBooks. You can do another Google search for QuickBooks desktop reports, or you can call me. If it's a simple question, I'll try and answer for you. If it's going to be any more, entailed, we'd have to set something up. And I do believe,
I think
thank you.
that's it for you. And I don't think we don't have any questions. So again, I can't emphasize enough having the right person look at your books and showing you how to do things. Chuck is a great resource. Obviously, he's helped a number of my clients and SCORE clients in general. So, and with that, let's finish up the slides. If you can go to the next slide, Chuck. We are ending our social media skills workshop series. The next one is the week after Thanksgiving on the 30th, and it's building a strategic approach to social media. Altamis, who's the owner of Ezra Agency, is extremely knowledgeable, and I highly recommend. Social media is the backbone of almost every business at this point, so please join us. And if you can't attend in person, obviously you'll always get the recording and the presentations of all of our workshops. Next slide, please. The last of our intellectual property one is on December 7th, and we talk about designs, provisionals, and utilities. Again, it's a very good workshop. Doug Lineberry is very entertaining, even though he is an attorney. So he's a great guy to obviously just be attention to. If you need a mentor, please reach out to us. Just go to our website there and ask for a mentor. There are mentors if you're out of our region and not in our in the one beautiful low country. You can obviously ask for a mentor, and someone just asked, yes, everyone's going to get a recording and obviously and this PowerPoint presentation, so you will be able to view it at a later date. Next slide, please. We are always looking for volunteers. So if you are looking to obviously help, we're in a need for obviously people to help us with our social media, as well as Spanish speaking business mentors in order to help our community. Next slide. Please reach out to us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and follow us. And that way you'll stay up to date of any of our future ones, because we're in the process of looking at next year and figuring out when we're doing what presentations, and you may find them useful. And next slide. And we are a resource partner of the SBA, and that we obviously are